How about what a great start. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Eric McNamara, and I'm going to be reading some book today. Or books. Probably not books, because I'm not that fast of a reader. But I figured, why not? So, tonight I have Unsolved Mysteries of American History. That's what I'm going to be reading now. This is by Paul Aaron. An eye-opening journey through 500 years of discoveries, disappearances, and baffling events. Sounds interesting. So, it starts with acknowledgments and then goes to the introduction. So I will just start with the acknowledgments. For much useful advice, thanks to Stephen Aaron, John Kingston, Robert Thompson, and my agent, John Thornton. Judith McCarthy has been the ideal editor. Her judgments have always been incisive, but never been discouraging. Others at Wiley who have helped or have been helpful are Chris Jackson, Elaine O'Neill, and John Simcoe. Finally, I am grateful to my wife, Paula Blank, and for her perspective readings of the manuscript and its author. Very interesting. Introduction. Ellery Queen's 1934 novel, The Chinese Orange Mystery, presents us with a murder scene that's completely backwards. The rug and table are upside down, the grandfather clock and bookcases face the wall. A set of Hebrew books, Hebrew being a language written from left or right to left, i.e. backwards, is missing. It turns out the murderer has turned around everything in the room just to conceal the one thing, which would normally be backwards, the dead man's collar. The dead man was a priest, and priests always wear their collars backwards. At this point, the rest of the puzzle pieces easily fit together, and the mystery is solved. The detective, wrote Queen, is a prophet looking backwards. So is the historian. Like a detective, he or she must look backwards, trying to figure out what happened and why. And like the detective in Queen's story, the historian must examine evidence, which is often not what it seems. Take, for example, the mystery of whether Leif Erikson and his band of Norsemen, or Norse women, too, if one is to believe the ancient Icelandic sagas, discovered America above 500 years before Columbus. By the early 19th century, Leif's advocates had scoured the east coast of North America. No stone was left unturned in the search for evidence of Leif's settlement. And a remarkable number of those stones turned out to have Norse inscriptions on them. In towns from Newfoundland to Florida, the claim that Leif Erikson was here was as common as the claim that George Washington slept here. Alas, both claims were equally improbable. On closer examination, most of these reputable or reputed Norse relics turned out to be crude hoaxes. Then in 1964, near a small fishing village in northern Newfoundland, the Norwegian archaeologist Helge Ingstad uncovered an ancient Norse spindle whorl. Here at last was genuine proof of Leif's settlement. This was better than finding a Viking sword, for it proved that the sagas were right not only about Norsemen coming to America, but about Norse women too. It was the women who would have the spindle whorl, or spindle wool. Case closed? By no means. According to the sagas, Leif had named the country he found Vinland, or Wineland, after the wild grapes he found there. But botanists assure us that grapes can't grow can't grow any further north than Massachusetts, and a glance at any map shows Newfoundland atop Massachusetts. But how could Vinland have been in Newfoundland? To make sense of something so backwards, or in this case, so upside down, required a detective Ellery Queen's a detective of Ellery Queen's ingenuity. Was Ingstad up to the task? To find out, see Chapter 2. Ooh. And that, as they say, is just the beginning. Did Pocahontas really rescue John Smith? Was Daniel Boone a traitor? Was Sally Hemings the mistress of Thomas Jefferson? Was Amelia Earhart a spy? Were the Rosenbergs guilty? Who killed JFK? How much did Reagan know about the Iran-Contra affair? These are mysteries that have intrigued, sometimes baffled, but never deterred our most resourceful historians. These are mysteries, all the twists and turns, all the intellectual challenges, all the espionage and murder that you could hope for from Amber and Chandler, Parker and Paretsky. After all, these are the greatest mysteries of our history. That sounds pretty good so far. I'm just going to drink. You just pull up this here. And this one. Sorry. Just in case. There we go. Okay. So, back to the book. Unsolved Mysteries of American History. This is Chapter 1. When did the first people arrive in America? Soon after Columbus landed in America, Europeans began speculating about the people of this new world. To Columbus himself, there was no mystery, since he assumed he'd reached some island off the shore of India, as all of Asia was then sometimes known. He had few doubts about who these people were, or what to call them. But once it became clear that the Indians were not in fact Indians, theories about who they were and where they came from abounded. One theory, which was especially popular in Spain, was that the Indians were surveyors. No, it is survivors, I'm sorry. The Indians were survivors of the last continent of Atlantis. Atlantis, according to stories dating back as far as Plato's dialogues, once stretched from Spain to America, but had sunk in a great flood. The first to tie the people of Atlantis to those of America was Francisco Lopez de Gomara. Ooh, what a name. In 1552, he explained that the Indians had been stranded in America when Atlantis sunk. As evidence, Gomara pointed out that the Mexican Indians used the word atl for water, ATL. That's how it's spelled. Another persistent theory was that the Indians were descendants of the lost tribes of Israel, whose exile to Assyria had been chronicled in the Old Testament and who hadn't been heard from since. These are all theories of what the Indians were. A Dutch theologian named Johannes Frederikus Lominius, these names, seems to have been the first to make the connection between Jews and American Indians, arguing in 1567 that both had big noses and strange burial customs. The first to move beyond such myths towards a serious study of American Indians were Spanish friars, among them the Jesuit missionary Jose de Acosta. In 1589, big difference there, only 400 years, no big deal. In 1589, Acosta hypothesized that the Indians had reached the New World via an overland route from Asia. Here was a man ahead of his time. By the 20th century, most scholars agreed he was right on the mark. Oh, okay, so they're thinking they came over from the land bridge there. The consensus began to emerge in the mid-19th century after Charles Darwin theorized that human beings first evolved in Africa, then spread around the rest of the world. Fossil evidence seemed to bear Darwin out. Africa and Europe could boast of numerous archaeological sites indicating the presence of humans tens of thousands of years ago. America had none, or at least none that weren't strongly disputed. Advances in geology strengthened the case for an overland route by demonstrating that a land bridge once existed between Siberia and Alaska, where today the waters of the Bering Strait are found. So it seemed the mystery had been solved. Native Americans were not truly native. They had come from Asia, but an equally intriguing mystery remained. When had they arrived? That's a good question. Oh, there is a picture over here as well. And the picture says stone spear points found between the ribs of Ice Age mammoths. Oh, it's okay. I see what it is. It's a mammoth and a bunch of basically there's a guy on top of a ledge trying to throw a rock on mammoths, and then there's a couple of guys trying to throw spears at it. So, stone spear points found between the ribs of Ice Age mammoths prove people were living in America 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. If human hunters arrived in America about that time, that might also explain, according to some paleocologists. I thought I was paleontologists, but it's collegists. Maybe that's something different. I'm not perfect. Why such Ice Age animals as mammoths, like this one from an Arizona State Museum diorama construction, quickly became extinct by permission of the Arizona State Museum. Okay. All right, so back to what we were talking about here. So it seemed the mystery had been solved, that Native Americans were not truly native. They had come from Asia, but an equally intriguing mystery remained: when had they arrived? So that's where we left off there. Until the 1960s and 1970s, this mystery also seemed nearly solved. The consensus was that people crossed into America about 12,000 years ago. Hello, JJ. Welcome to the chat. This was near the end of the last ice age, when so much of the Earth's water was locked up in glaciers that the Bering Land Bridge, also known as Beringia, was left exposed. Beringia had, to be sure, an inhospitable climate, worse than that of Alaska and Siberia today. But the climate had warmed up enough for humans to survive in the area. Fossils found there indicate that woolly mammoths, steppe bison, wild horses, and caribou all lived in this region. And their human hunters might very well have followed them onto and across the bridge. So the 12,000-year estimate made sense. Any earlier and it would have been too cold for the people to survive so far north. Any later and the water from the melting glaciers would have submerged the land bridge and blocked the passage across. This geological logic was buttressed, sorry if I can't pronounce some words properly, by archaeological evidence. In 1908, a black cowboy named George McJunkin was riding near the small town of Folsom, New Mexico, searching for a lost cow. Instead, he came across some bones with a stone spear point beside them. The bones were much too large to belong to a cow. This intrigued McJunkin. He took them back to the ranch. There they stayed until 1925, when they landed on the desk of Jesse Figgins of the Colorado Museum of Natural History. Figgins easily identified the bones as those of long extinct form of bison that had roamed the plains at the end of the Ice Age. Ooh, interesting. But it was the stone spear points McJunkin had found beside the bones that had the more far-reaching implications. If these spear points were man-made weapons used to kill the bison, That meant humans had been hunting and living in America during the Ice Age. More indications of Ice Age hunters followed soon after. In 1932, two amateur collectors exploring near Clovis, New Mexico, found the bones of some animals with stone spearheads between the ribs. In this case, the animals turned out to be woolly mammoths, also extinct since the Ice Age. And with the spear points right between the ribs, there could be little doubt that people were in America during the Ice Age. In the 1950s, a University of Chicago scientist named Willard Libby developed radiocarbon dating, which allowed scientists to determine the age of the Folsom and Clovis finds more precisely. They turned out to date back between 10,000 and 11,500 years ago, thus fitting in very neatly with the puzzle being pieced together. Excuse me, I just have to get a drink here. This is very peaceful. Well, thank you, JJ. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you for joining me. In the 1950s, a university scientist named Willard Libby I just read that. Sorry that. So too did evidence that came right from the prehistoric Indians' mouths, or rather teeth. After examining more than 200,000 prehistoric teeth from the remains of about 9,000 prehistoric Indians, anthropologist Christy Turner determined that all Native American teeth shared certain genetic traits with Northeast Asian teeth. These traits were unique. No other people had them besides the North American Indians and the Northeast Asians. From this, Turner concluded that the Indians' ancestors must have come from Northeast Asia. What's more, by examining the differences between Northeast Asia and American Indian teeth, and by comparing them to general dental evolution patterns, Turner calculated that the two populations must have separated in the vicinity of, you guessed it, 12,000 years. If people first entered America about 12,000 years ago, that explained another mystery as well. The rapid extinction of mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed cats, native camels, giant beavers, and other large animals that roamed North America until about 10,000 years ago. When the bones of these animals were found at sites dated 12,000 years or older, there were no human artifacts nearby. When human artifacts less than 10,000 years old were found at similar sites, none of these animal bones were around. Only in finds dating back between 12,000 and 10,000 years ago, such as those at Clovis and Folsom, did human artifacts, for example, spearheads, and these bones appear together. From these, paleocologist Paul Martin formulated his hypothesis of Paleistocene overkill, or Pleistocene overkill. Sorry, it's Pleistocen. Not sure what that is. In 1967, Martin was convinced that human hunters crossed the Bering Land Bridge about 12,000 years ago and then moved south through an Ice Age corridor just east of the Canadian Rockies. Here they found mammals so completely unadapted to human predators that they quickly hunted them to extinction. Not all scientists accepted Martin's arguments. Some countered that climactic changes, or at least some combination of human hunting and climate, could better account for the extinctions. But there was no denying that the extinctions were yet another indication that people had crossed the Bering Land Bridge about 12,000 years ago. Boy, we just keep hearing that again over and over, haven't we? The mystery of when the first Americans arrived was, it seemed, solved. So hopefully we don't have to hear that over and over. Sorry. In the 1970s and 1980s, this consensus fell apart as not one, but many archaeologists claimed to uncover evidence of a human presence in America earlier in some cases, much earlier than 12,000 years ago. Between 1973 and 1977, James Adovasio excavated Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in southwest Pennsylvania. There he found remnants of baskets and small stone blades at levels that radiocarbon dating indicated were occupied almost 20,000 years ago. Wow. That's a huge difference. In 1976, in a Chilean peat bog called Monte Verde, Tom Dilhay unearthed the wooden foundations of huts occupied 13,000 years ago. At even deeper levels, he found 3 hearths and some tools made from pebbles that radiocarb dating showed to be about 34,000 years old. Oof. See, now we're getting kind of crazy here. This is like almost 3 times as much as the 12,000 years we were talking about before. Also in 1976, the husband and wife archaeologist team of Alan Bryan and Ruth Gruen found the skeleton of a mastodon with a stone point inside it at a site called Tamia in Venezuela. Radiocarbon dating placed the kill 13,000 years ago. Oh boy. There's a lot of examples here. And in 1978, Need Guedan dated some prehistoric art from a Brazilian rock shelter called Perda Foralda, sorry for the names, back to about 32,000 years ago, making it among the oldest art in the world. Interesting. And just went to that one. Okay, how could these people have traversed a continent still covered with glaciers? And how did they get to America in the first place, before there was a land bridge across the Bering? Proponents of the pre-12,000-year-old human presence in America have suggested a couple of possibilities. Some have suggested that people crossed into America during an earlier period when the land bridge was exposed, but when conditions had warmed somewhat. And even during the heart of the Ice Age, that they may have been an ice-free corridor, or there may have been an ice-free corridor only which people might have headed south. Another hypothesis, this one championed by the Canadian archaeologist Knut Fladmark, was that people traveled across the Bering Sea and down the west coast of the Americas by boat. The boats would have been very primitive, but perhaps the Pacific coast of North America might have sustained enough life for people to make it far enough south after they could have headed inland. After all, Fladmark pointed out, peace reached Austria about 40,000 years ago, also from Asia, and there was never a land bridge between those continents. Never a land bridge between those continents. Proponents of the traditional 12,000-year date have sharply attacked all of these findings and theories. One traditionalist, Brian Fagan, mockingly referred to the ice-free corridor of the prehistoric superhighway, beckoning the Paleo-Indians south from Beringia into warmer climates. Even at the warmest points during the Ice Age, Fagan argued this corridor could barely support animal or human life, and people that had little incentive to venture it. Let me just get another drink here, sorry. Thank you for that follow there, Ed. Undead Awe. Thank you. And Get Done 1234. Thank you both. Thank you for joining me. As for Fladmark's boat theory, traditionals responded that through the distance between Asia and America across the Bering Strait was about the same distance, or same as between Asia and Australia. The trip to Australia was across fairly placid tropical seas. In contrast, the Bering Strait, even during the warmer times of the Ice Age, was full of dangerous ice floes. And that's FLOES. Hardly an appealing trip for people who, from all other evidence, survived by hunting and not fishing. So we're trying to figure out how the heck they got over here, if there was no land bridge there. How then have traditionalists explained the pre-12,000-year-old finds? So basically what they're saying is, like, how could they get across there if we've got before 12,000 years they're over there, but yet there's no way that they got over there. So they're trying to figure out. That's pretty interesting. Many have claimed that the findings were simply wrong. In some cases, the artifacts supporting earlier dates may have been natural and not man-made. Trees may have fallen in ways that could be mistaken for human dwellings. Natural deposits may appear to be hearse pebbles eroded by streams may seem to be tools. In other cases, the dating process may have been corrupted. Radiocarbon dating depends on finding organic material, which can be carbon dated, at the same level as human artifacts, which cannot be carbon dated. And then, assuming that the latter are the same age as the former, but all sorts of geological disturbances could result in older organic matter ending up in the same layer as more recent human artifacts. The majority of archaeologists today still stand by the 12,000-year date. Besides questioning the validity of the claims for sites like Monteverde and Pere de Fuerda, these archaeologists, I don't know why I have such a hard time saying that, but you understand what I'm saying. Archaeologists point to the relatively small number of such sites. In Europe and Asia, on the other hand, there are thousands of well-documented sites that have yielded numerous and indisputably human artifacts dating more than 30,000 years. If people lived here more than 12,000 years ago, most archaeologists insist there ought to be more record of it. Or, as some traditional archaeologists have put, the absence of the evidence is evidence of absence. Ooh, that's pretty good. I like that. That's a funky way to say that. But to a much greater extent than was the case just a few years ago, archaeologists are willing to entertain the possibility that at least a few people may have arrived here earlier than 12,000 years ago. And even the most conservative archaeologists, I'll get that before the end, I promise, can't preclude the possibility that someday someone will find definitive proof that people were in America long before the Ice Age ended. Wow, that's pretty good. Well, alright, everybody. I hope that you enjoyed this. For anybody that just came in, that was the first chapter of Unsolved Mysteries of American History. So in this one, we talked about when did the first people arrive in America? So that's what we were talking about here. For anybody that didn't catch the full stream and wants to watch it, it will still be available on here. Again, for anybody that followed Undead Awe and Get Done 1, 2, 3, 4, thank you so much. For anybody that lurked in the background and hung out, thank you, JJ, for your chat, and thank you for anybody else. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. God bless. And I'm not sure if I'm going to do this on a nightly thing. This is a new thing. But if you do enjoy it, feel free to leave some comments or watch it or what have you, and maybe we'll be back. Thanks again, guys.